Hey everybody, starting in about 2.5 minutes. Love to know who's watching because I can't see you. Love to know where you're from, how old you are you a student, what grade you're in. And it'd be nice if someone could just post in the comments if you can actually hear me if you're watching live. Hey everybody, starting in about 1.5 minutes. Love to know who's watching, where you're from, how old you are. Well, good evening, everyone who's watching live, and hello to anyone who's watching this on YouTube after. This is I can't believe it, but this is actually my 6th YouTube Live. I've been doing one every 2 weeks since I think it was the beginning of January, and so can't believe we're heading into spring and we're here. If this is your first talk of mine that you're coming to, the other ones you can all find on the YouTube channel, which is where you're watching this. If you don't know me, my name's Brett Ullman. I live in a town called Ajax. Ajax is about 45 minutes east of the city of Toronto in Ontario, Canada. I was a teacher for about 9-10 years before I left that 15 years ago to do this. And this is actually my job. This more during COVID, but I am usually traveling and speaking, in churches, camps, conferences, businesses, and the list goes on. Mental health is probably my largest conversation. I struggle with a pretty severe anxiety disorder, and you can find that on my talk, Hope for the Walking Wounded. I speak to parents. I have a new talk called Parenting Navigating Everything, which is a broad conversation looking at the foundations of parenting: communication, time, discipline, parenting styles. I then speak on some of the tougher conversations: pornography, sexuality. I do talk on media. I have a talk for men looking at how we can become better fathers, husbands, and boyfriends. And tonight's talk is called Dating for Life, and I'm going to switch to this mode for the rest of the talk so you can see me. As a side note, I'm 49. I'm married with 2 kids. My wife's name is Dawn. She's a nurse. My daughter Zoe is in first-year university. She's actually at a university called Western. If you live in Ontario, you would know that. She's actually at residence. And my son Ben is in grade 12. He's a senior. And so both my kids, a lot of loss during the COVID season, like a lot of you who are listening, if you are students. So dating for life. I think this is an important conversation to equip you as a student to date. And we're going to talk about what the word dating means, or to equip you as a parent or a youth leader in how we have these conversations. Now, I want to start with a quote, and as a speaker, I'm supposed to use small quotes. I'm going to use one that's 3 slides long, but I think this is a profound quote. It says, "We don't commit now. We don't see the point. They've always said there are so many fish in the sea, but never before has that sea of fish been right at our fingertips on OkCupid, Tinder, dating sites. Take your pick. We can order up a human being in the same way we can order up pad thai on Seamless. We think intimacy lies in a perfectly executed string of emoji. We think effort is a good morning text. We say romance is dead because maybe it is, but maybe we just need to reinvent it. Maybe romance in our modern age is putting the phone down long enough to look into each other's eyes at dinner. Maybe romance is still there. We just don't know what it looks like now. When we choose, if we commit, we're still one eye wandering." What an interesting line. One eye wandering at the options. We want the beautiful cut of filet mignon, but we're too busy eyeing the mediocre buffet because choice. Because choice. Our choices are killing us. We think choice means something. We think opportunity is good. We think the more choices we have, or chances we have, the better, but it makes everything watered down. Never mind actually feeling satisfied. We don't even understand what satisfaction looks like, sounds like, feels like. We're 1 foot out the door because outside the door is more. We don't see who's right in front of our eyes asking to be loved because no one is asking to be loved. We long for something that we still want to believe exists, yet we are looking for the next thrill, the next jolt of excitement, the next instant gratification. We realize that this more we want is a lie. We want phone calls. We want to see a face we love absent of the blue dim of a phone screen. What an amazing line. We want slowness. We want simplicity. We want a life that does not need the validation of likes, favorites, comments, upvotes. We may not yet know we want this, but we do. We want connection, true connection. We want a love that builds, not a love that gets discarded for the next hit. We want to come home to people. We want to lay down our heads at the end of our lives and know we lived well. This is what we want, even if we don't know it yet. Yet this is not how we date now. This is not how we love now. I found this blog profound. It was written by someone in their early 20s. And if things are working, then I say we keep doing them. But I find an incredible dysfunction in the world of dating today. And I travel and speak to many students. And so today I want to give you some thoughts. I want to challenge you on some things. Now, just a couple of quick ground rules as we get into this. Number 1, have opinions. Meaning, I hope you have thought through dating and what dating is and it's not, but have opinions and challenge opinions. I always say opinions should be put forth like this, where we can challenge them. The Bible says iron sharpens iron, right? We can think through these things. Number 2, learn how to learn. I mean, you can take notes, you can watch and rewatch this, but you need to have a system for learning and then a way to process things. And now, terminology is the interesting one. I'm 49, meaning the way I grew up is different than my own kids right now. And so just the terminology of dating today and relationships. I mean, I've heard people talk about talking. And, my generation would be, you might say you're seeing each other and then you're dating and then you're engaged and married. But today there's all of these levels. Now, depending on where you're from, I've heard different conversations on dating in St. John's, Newfoundland, than I've heard in Vancouver, British Columbia, and different ones in Toronto. So it's different. I mean, people talk about snapping someone. Well, I mean, that's just digital conversation. Talking, dating, hooking up's another conversation. Here's my point. I don't care what terminology you call it. What is the end game? What is the goal? Os Guinness says, I live before an audience of one. Oz is one of my favorite authors. But how do we do this? And I come from a Christian faith-based perspective. How do we look for the one? And we'll talk about that later because I disagree with that. How do we look for the one and not have them replace the one God in our life? And I would say it's by heading into dating relationships with preparation and intentionality. And understanding that the person you date should never replace who God is in your life. Now, I just want to address this, and we're not going to unpack it a ton, but it's an important thing just to say this is part of our kind of the problem we have today. In the book, The Blue Parakeet, Scott says, how can we take a Bible that forbids sex outside of marriage, that was written in a time when there was little or no time that passed between between sexual purity and marriage, and apply it to today's situation. Here's our trouble. In human history, there were only children and adults until roughly the mid-1950s, when suddenly there's a new category called teenagers. You used to go to elementary school, then leave and go work on the family farm. And then we have high school, and then post high school, and then postgraduate stuff. And now we have teenagers, and then we have young adults, and now we have delayed adolescence into your 20s or 30s. And so no longer is it you're young and then you're kind of an adult. There's this mushy middle. And as Christians, if we're going to believe that sex is made for marriage, then this causes some problems. So I just acknowledge, yes, this is a big deal. So the history of dating, before World War I, it was called courting or calling. So this is not even my generation, right? This is something that I would say to someone like, can I call on you? And then I would go over to her house, and I'd be like, her aunts and uncles and cousins would all be around a table, and I would be questioned and interrogated. That's not how my life has worked. After World War I, it changed to going out, but this is the shift that happened. The shift in power went, and this is from an article from The Gospel and Sex by Timothy Keller. The shift in power went from the woman to the man. The shift in focus went from the family to the couple. I think that was a really big change. And the shift went from assessing character to having a good time. Now, I would say when people in our church world say sometimes, we should go back to courting, I don't know why we idolize certain times in human history better than others. Courting wasn't some great thing that worked really, really well. So I try to put my talks kind of in one picture sometimes. So the top picture, kind of there in the middle, is dating. So you date, and then the question is it the right person? There's only two answers, yes or no. If it's no, you break up and you start this dysfunctional thing of dating. Or the answer is yes, and then you get married. And then there's two issues here. One is divorce, and divorce plays a big role in society today. And I think not preparing for dating and choosing the wrong people plays a huge role. There's many other things as well. There's also not dating at all. We have created, and this is a new thing we have, where people don't even date in our Christian world. I can't tell you how many times I'm invited by a high school, or usually young adults pastor, who says, hey, can you please tell our young adults to date? And I'm like, what do you mean? And he's like, none of them are even dating. They're not even looking. I do think there is something called purity culture that we made many, many years ago when I was growing up, which is kind of like everything was bad. And if you did anything sexual, you're broken forever. And it's just not true. Not saying we don't try to have you not do certain things, but this is kind of an interesting thought. And I would say for the students who listen, your generation's not getting better at dating. And I don't think any teenagers that I talk to would say, yeah, I think we're really good at this. I just think we need to be open to the possibility that we're awful at dating and look at how we can get better. So what do I see today in dating? And again, use whatever word you want for dating, but we're going to talk about what that is too. But we overdo things. We overcomplicate. I mean, sometimes you're just going for a coffee or a burger or Starbucks. We overcomplicate. Why? Because we overthink. We watch shows like The Bachelor, The Bachelorette, where we analyze every single minutia of stuff that happens. We over-spiritualize. I was on a date once, a third date with a girl. She baked me cookies and told me I was the one. I kept the cookies and we split up that night. It's the third date. And she kind of said that God told her that I was the one. We over-romanticize. We over-sexualize. We are passive. We're just passive in this conversation. We have choices who we date, when we date. We're not victims in this. We underread. We don't think about this. Have you ever read a book on dating? And most people actually say no. We under-prepare. We under-engage. That's not getting engaged, but under-thinking about this. We underutilize community. I think especially in our Christian world, we underutilize the community around us, family and friends and everyone, and then we just underdate. And again, I'm not against dating. I'm actually for dating. I think there's a certain time and a certain age that you're better to start this, but I'm not against this conversation. So the outline for this talk, I want to go through 8 questions, literally. What is dating? When should I start dating? So I have an earlier talk called Dating for Life, just Dating for Life. If you search on YouTube, you will find it on my channel. I wanted to go back when I made this talk a number of years ago to the basics. So what is it? When should I start? Am I ready to start dating? How do I start dating? What an interesting question. What are red flags in my dating relationships? How do I find out if they're the one? And I disagree with that term, but we'll walk through that. How do I break up? Because if you're going to date, you're probably going to break up. And then what if they are the right person for me? Now you might be listening and going, why is this even important? Here's why. And when you choose a life partner, you're choosing a lot of things, including your parenting partner and someone who will deeply influence your children, your eating companion for 20,000 meals, your travel companion for around 100 vacations, your primary leisure time and retirement friend, your career therapist, and someone whose day you'll hear about 18,000 times. That's why this is important. This is unbelievably an important conversation. So, what is dating? Dating is dating. Dating is not dating. It's not sitting at home and waiting for God to give you someone. I do think we over-spiritualize that conversation. It's not also asking every person you see randomly for a date. Now, this image is an interesting one. It's the idea of you begin to date, but for most of us, we know that there is a tornado somewhere along that road. We're in grade 9. Do you think you're going to be with that person forever? Because I've talked to thousands of students who've challenged me and said, of course we will. And then they write letters 6 months later. Because what's the average relationship in high schools? I mean, between 6 and 9 months, if that. So what is dating? Now, I'm going to give you my terminology. And again, we have lots of terminologies. Use mine, don't. There's 3 categories that I kind of see. And marriage should be marriage. I don't know why it doesn't. I think I see that every time and I always forget to change it. And then there's a little tiny engagement. So the first one, small d dating. Small d. You're not changing status on social media. You're not telling people you're in a relationship. And I like the term hanging out. It's initial investigation. It might be going out for coffee and saying, what is your last name again? There is community involvement, meaning what? You ask your friends and your family, what do you think of that guy? What do you think of that girl? If everyone you love says that they're not probably good for you, guess what? They're probably not good for you. It's coffee and a meal. There is no commitment. There is no physical involvement. And this is where I think we mess up as society today, where we get involved physically, sometimes even before we date. There is a portion of the college, university, young adult kind of culture that will actually sleep together and then decide if you want to date. And I think that's very destructive, and we'll talk about that a bit later. And then basic questions of compatibility. I'm really big on questions. We're going to end off this talk with a whole bunch of them. Then we actually are dating, which means you are exclusive. Call it whatever term you want. It's just the two of you. It's relationship building, community and still involvement, coffee and meal. There's some commitment. There's some physical involvement. I'm not saying sex, but some. And complex questions and compatibility. Engagement is short. And then marriage, call it what you want. Relationship build. This is where this isn't finished. It keeps going. And this is where I think we do a disservice sometimes in our church world, where we kind of finish when people get married and not building into how do we build into our marriages. Relationship building, community involvement, coffee and a meal, lifelong commitment, physical involvement. And again, this should include in our church world talking about how do we have good sex lives in our marriages. The number of times I say that and people kind of like that shouldn't be an uncommon conversation. Physical involvement and ongoing questions of compatibility. And I think I like this. And if someone has something different, let me know. And we can look at creating something different. So when should I start dating? Great question. Now, there's only 3 real options. Junior high, high school, young adult, college, university, apprenticeships, workplace, whatever. Now, I guess you could go all the way back and talk about someone in grade 3 who's dating someone. Can we just agree dating someone in grade 3 is the dumbest thing ever? We begin dating when we're young, usually because our parents are pushing us into that. I live in Ajax. We had these town dances. It was like grades 4, 5, 6, 7. I forget the grades it was, but I'd see people on like my age, so Facebook, and they'd say on Facebook things like, hey, Hey, my daughter can take your son to the dance. And it's like, you're in grade 5. Like, why would you rent a limo? Like, it's just weird conversations. So here's what I like. I think you should start dating when you're at an age and stage in life where the relationship, now, please listen to the language because it's so important, where the relationship could have the chance of moving towards something else. I did not say it will, did not say it must, but I'm saying, it might. Now, I actually, in my house, have told my kids they weren't allowed to date till they were 16. Now, my son ended up dating someone just a little bit earlier than that. My son's a November baby, and he was going to date a girl up at camp, and actually called us and actually talked about it because we had this rule. Now, I think I should have probably said grade 12, because before that, every relationship, most of you know, split up, because that's just the way it is. Now, if there's adults on the call, and there's a few I know, many adults met their spouses in high school. It just doesn't happen today. It's incredibly rare. Could it? It could, but statistics are not very high with that. Now, I just think if you're dating someone for no reason, I call it mutual timed relationship destruction. And I'm not kidding. That's kind of what it is. Like, you're dating them for a season, and then you will split up. And I think it's just too casual, and it's actually just more like a game. So, am I ready to start dating? So Andy Stanley has a series called Love, Sex, and Dating. It's a YouTube series and a book. One of my favorite. I'm going to link to that at the end. He says this. So are you ready to start dating? Are you the type of person you're looking for is looking for? Now just sit on that one for a second. Are you the type of person that you're looking for is looking for? Meaning, if you found the person that was perfect in your mind of who you're looking for, would they look at you and would they just pass right by? And it's an interesting kind of thought, because if you're not the person they're looking for, then maybe you need to be different. And again, we're always growing, pruning, yearning, working, building to be better people. Now, I read this once, and it said, am I ready to start dating? Far too often, the first step a Christian takes in thinking about how to date God's way is to sit down and make a list of all the qualities their future spouse needs to have. Then, they only date people who fit that list. Now, where the forethought is admirable, our first step in trying to date in a way that honors God is to be someone worth dating. Our faith in Jesus should be as active and meaningful as Paul describes in the book of Colossians. We should be rooted and built up in Jesus. Lists are fine, but we should make a list of who we're to be first. And I really like this. So who are you? Are you, as it just said, walking in Him? Are you a true disciple? Or are you a non-practicing Christian? That term is usually a non-practicing Catholic, and I think it works in Catholic, Protestant, mainline churches, right? We confess Christian faith, but live out something very different. I read a quote once. Someone said this: run as fast as you can towards God, and if someone keeps up, introduce yourself. I actually find that quite amusing. So, these are just some things. Are you ready to date? And now, this is the one that people write me hate mail for, and I'm not really saying it as a joke, even though it comes across as tongue-in-cheek. If your mom or dad still does your laundry, you're not ready to date. And I just want people to think of what I'm saying there. If you think dating is something you should do, then I think there's a maturity level that if your mom, which is another conversation, or your dad is doing your laundry, then maybe you're not at a stage where you should be dating. Are you comfortable being alone? And I'm not talking about social isolation. I'm not talking about where right now, from a pandemic standpoint, some of us can't, we have to be alone for certain times. I'm saying, if you need to date someone, there's a problem with that. Are you dealing with your own addictions? Pornography, like sex addiction, other things like that, alcohol, drugs. Don't bring someone else into your chaos. Deal with your addictions. As a side note, you can deal with those addictions, right? This isn't something we can't deal with. If you want to be single, stay single. If you want to just play video games 5 hours a night every night, then don't bring someone into that. Submission is kind of like God, and I would say it's actually God, them, you. I think that's a good priority. And media we'll come back to later, just the kind of sexualized culture we live in today. And I would say there's some spiritual conversations. Pray, and I'm not saying you pray for the specific person, but pray for opportunities. Pray for connection. Pray for situations to meet people. Pray for guidance in your life. Spiritual disciplines spiritual practices, right? Grow in your faith, read, pray, fast, study, give, the list goes on. Volunteer, deal with your debt from a financial standpoint. There's a stewardship conversation, but just a money standpoint there. Like walk through the Dave Ramsey courses or whoever else you want to. And school and work, I would say, pursue those things that you want. I'm talking with someone recently, it's funny I say recently, we've been at home for a year. It was at least a year. But it was a conversation, a girl said to me, she said, we're just talking about work and I'm talking about challenging work. And she said, well, my boyfriend works at Costco. And I'm like, there's nothing wrong with Costco. And she said, but he said he's going to go to teacher's college. I said, oh, that's great. Where did he do his undergrad? And she said, oh, he hasn't started his undergrad. Well, how long has he been saying he's going to do that? And she goes, well, 7 years. And I'm like, right? At a certain point, you're not looking at walking into that role of whatever job you want. And again, please don't hear me the wrong way there. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with Costco. I do think even if you work at a Costco, you can, become a shift manager or in time a store manager. Like, right? But there's things that we can keep working at moving forward. My point with all of these is be someone worth dating. Now, soulmate is an interesting terminology. This article says, but then my theologian, biblical scholar father shattered my dreams by informing me that God doesn't have a husband for me, doesn't have a plan for who I marry. Not true, I scolded him, attacking him with the full force of Jeremiah 29:11, that God knows the plans he has for me, plans to prosper me and not to harm me, plans to give me a hope and a future. And obviously that meant a hot Christian husband, because God delights in giving me the desires of my heart. He slammed through my horrible, yet popular, biblical abuse by reminding me that the first verse applied to the people of Israel. Read the book of Jeremiah, in regards to a specific time, and didn't even dignify my horrible abuse of the second verse with a rebuttal. Nope, he said, a husband is not only not a biblical promise, it is also not a specific element of God's plan for my life. It's an interesting thought. God's plan for us is to be made more holy, more like Christ, not to marry a certain person. This advice was also used when I asked what college God wanted me to go to, accompanied, I think, by God doesn't want you to be an idiot, so go somewhere you will learn. Great advice. And then he gave me some of the best relationship advice I've ever got. There is no biblical basis to indicate that God has one soulmate for you to find and to marry. You could have a great marriage with any number of compatible people. There is not one person for you, but once you marry someone, that person becomes your one. I think you're ready to date when you can unromanticize this conversation. Now, I'm not saying we can't be romantics. I'm just saying this idea that there's one person specifically for you. If you packed up today and moved from wherever you live halfway across the country, if I left Toronto, like if I was single and left Toronto and moved to Vancouver, guess what? I'm probably going to meet someone and get married. If you live in as far north as you can go in Canada, and you move to as far south as you could go in California, guess what? You're probably going to meet someone and get married. If you are a military family and your family moves to Germany and you are on a military base, guess what? You'll probably meet someone and get married. If you're going to tell me then, but the other person will also, their family will transfer and meet and get married, we're heading into a weird conversation of fate and destiny. There was a movie years ago, I don't know if it's on Netflix, Gwyneth Paltrow, Pepper from Iron Man's wife. I think she's still going to be in the Avengers movies as a side note. Anyways, but there was a movie where it was called Sliding Doors, where she either caught or did not catch the subway. And the movie split into two at this moment. Fascinating, because one, she met the guy, and one, she didn't. And would kind of fate and destiny move all over? Listen, a woman named Pamela Druckerman once said this, but a soulmate isn't a pre-existing condition. It's an earned title, and it's earned over and made over time. Again, we're just talking about, are you ready to date? And I just think this is an important conversation. Now, singleness, please don't hear me wrong to anyone who's single. I am not saying I'm sorry you're single. I'm saying I'm sorry that we often in our church world have made an idol out of marriage and an idol out of family ministries at the expense of single people in our churches. Just like I say in my mental health talk, to do walkthroughs, our church, to do a walkthrough thinking about mental health, like is your church a safe space for someone with mental health? I was at a church once, and even the sign said, we're a family church, family ministries, and there's nothing wrong with that. But the person I talked to was single and just said, I kind of feel like I'm not part of it. So to the singles, I would just say this. First off, sometimes people question maybe they should be single, especially in the church world. I mean, average age for marriage these days is low 30s, if I'm correct. I think it's 31 and 33, a little bit lower for women. But here's what people, like, especially in the church, is a little bit lower. And so someone will be in their mid-20s and start saying, well, maybe God wants me to be single because I'm single. And this is the verse we always throw out. But here's what I would just say. How do you know if God calls you to be single? If you desire to be with someone, it's not you. Like, I can say it again. Like, that's as simple as it is. If you desire to be with someone, you're probably not called to be single. Now, John Stott was asked this question. Do you think a person can know at an early age that he or she is called to singleness, or is it something you just fall into? Here's his great answer. I have no doubt that there are some people who believe God has called them to be celibate, like no sex, and to commit themselves to celibacy for the rest of their lives. Personally, I have real hesitations about the wisdom of that, because I'm not convinced that people say no in their 20s that God has called them to that. If they take a vow of celibacy, I think they may find themselves in grave difficulties later when they may fall deeply in love with someone and begin to change their mind about their guidance. Then they're in trouble with any vow that they might have taken. And he just said, I'm not in favor of taking these vows of celibacy. I personally believe more in the second alternative you've given, that people discover it gradually, and as the years pass, begin to think that God is probably not calling them to marry. They don't meet a person with whom they believe God's calling them to share their life. And the rest of this is just going through, it's this process. And maybe at some point you think that, but it doesn't need to be at the beginning. This is an interview from I was 4 years old at the time of this interview, but I think it's not a curse to be single, just like it's not a curse to be married. I think sometimes people think it's a spiritual gift to be married and a curse to be single, and it's not. If you're single, enjoy your singleness. Live as a strong Christian in that. If you are married, the exact same. So how do you start dating? And this might sound simple. Go on a date, and if you want to call dating something different, you do. Now, to date, first off, coming from a Christian paradigm, it's hard enough to find someone in the greater world, yet alone this is Christianity. It's smaller. And then, I'm going to actually say it in this way. You can't see me. Like, if this is the world and this is how much is Christian, like culture, in that, it's a smaller amount of people you can actually find. And so that's why it's hard. So you're going to have to be in environments where you can meet and talk to people. I see too many people who just stay. They only attend their little church in their little town. Nothing wrong with, I'm not saying leaving your church. I'm just saying you gotta be in environments. So church, attending and volunteering. Events, which I look forward to again. Concerts, birthdays, barbecues. Backyard barbecues are coming around the corner. Online dating, I think, is a great thing these days. I actually met my wife on an online date. Now, she was on an online date with another guy, and when he went to the washroom, I went over and said hi, and we were married 11 months later. But online dating today is normal. It was not back in the day when we were dating. But I mean, whether it's online dating, things like speed dating, and I say not Tinder, and I added in tonight a question mark, and here's why. I've always said not Tinder, and I now would change my mind and say, for some of you, actually Tinder. I know a number of Christians who met and have gotten married through Tinder. This is where culture shifts. So Tinder came out as a hookup app. Swipe, right? It was more of a hookup conversation, and culture changes. And so I think we give grace and mercy to things, that there are people who are on Tinder who are not just looking at, like, yes, someone's attractive, but they're looking at their profile and the different things inside that. So dating apps, and it's a bigger conversation thinking on that. But I mean, I think it's okay to meet people. You're going to have to actually ask someone out for coffee. And you should have the basic communication skills and reading body language to know that they're answered before you ask it. I also think the question is, are we just flirting with people? Like, if we flirt with someone and they ask us out and then we say no, I mean, we're really playing with people's hearts. Are they like-worthy? Not do they like me, not do they think I'm attractive, are they worth my like? Dating is one of these things that it has to be about you. Right? You have to, I remember dating an amazing, beautiful, strong Christian girl, and for whatever reason, it wasn't there for me. And so we split up. Right? It has to be something that you both feel the exact same way. And it's not, oh, they like me, I guess I should date someone. For some, it's just the building of a friendship until one day one of you asks, are we dating? Like, is that not just the most pure conversation? You just kind of keep building up until one day you're like, I think we're dating. Open and discussed boundaries, and then opened up community involvement, family, inner circle, leaders around you. This is where I think when you talk about arranged marriages in different kind of other faith communities around the world, Christianity doesn't have that. But from our community, we should be looking more at the conversation of listening to what friends and family say about these people. Now, let me just address sex for a second. Andy Stanley says, while adding a dose of physical involvement into the mix makes a relationship more exciting and enjoyable, it also makes it more complicated. And please listen to this. You are sexually compatible with far more people than you are relationally compatible. You're sexually compatible with everyone. You are relationally compatible with a lot less. He says, my hunch is the root of your previous relational challenges was relational, not sexual. Chances are that you would have addressed the relational challenges more quickly if you hadn't been physically involved. In fact, you would have ended the relationship sooner if you hadn't been sexually involved. Not only is sex not the litmus test, meaning is it good or bad for relational compatibility, but it actually inhibits and distracts from relational development. Why? Because sex has the capacity to camouflage an endless list of relational deficiencies and dysfunctions. Romance overpowers objectivity. Now, as Christians, we do life different, and we talk about sex being inside, the covenant of marriage. And when you use your sexuality to control your destiny, I think we've moved from the will of God. But I've been in public environments having conversations. I don't speak on like sex like this in front of a public audience, but I've been asked after, and I would say this to anyone dating. Being sexually involved means you're not actually anymore questioning and critiquing who you're dating, because there's a million chemicals that happen in the brain. That kind of stuff is great when you're married, right? It's meant to be we call it the glue that binds you together. But I think we need to look at this, because I think many people think they're in love and they're not, right? They're just, the chemicals are there, and the chemicals make you think something, and it might not be true. So if you really want to have a good relationship, if you really want to find the right person, I would say from a non-Christian perspective, hold off on this. From a Christian perspective, there's a reason why we say this. Andy says, we say things like, I can't live without you. And I would say, like, why are you saying that? That's a dependent conversation. I can't make it without you. Same. Number 3, I'm not sure I want to live without you. And I'd say that's not really an appealing statement that we say to people. Kind of almost making someone, threatening them that you'll do something if they leave you is actually, like, there's problems with that. Excuse me. I'll never overcome this without you. Why not? People say, with your help, I can be a better person. I would say, then be a better person. Number 6, before you came along, I was lost. And I would say, people do not fix you. If you were if you were broken going into a dating relationship, you'll be broken in that dating relationship. People don't fix you. What's that movie from a lifetime ago? Excuse me, again, I'm like coughing into a live mic. It was the Tom Cruise movie, You Complete Me. Remember that one with Renee Zellweger? It's not true. People don't complete you. I'm incomplete without you, number 8. Like, you're still incomplete. So these are lines we need to question and critique when people say. Now, I'm going to address probably the number 1 question I get asked. Brett, is it okay to date a non-Christian? And I'm going to answer what I think is very clear. And the answer is no. And this is the problem when we say this. Here's what it kind of sounds like. Christian good, non-Christian bad. So it's like the good Christian shouldn't date a bad. And it's like, that is not the conversation. If you as a Christian date someone who's not a Christian, I'm going to assume they're a really good person. And guess what? We have millions of really good people around us. Not everyone is, it's not like everyone Christian is good. Everyone secular is bad and doing all these bad things. But here's the problem. If the cornerstone of your life is your faith, and who you date, one day you will marry. Like, my kids both go to camp. My kids go to a camp called Minneoe, and I love camp. And I hope my kids marry someone one day who will want their kids to go to a camp. I hope my kids have kids one day, right? Like spouses, they can go and enjoy like missions trips with, like I was able to, or even just to go to church with their spouse and think contemplatively on issues of faith and love and all these other things. But if you date someone who's not a Christian, what happens is you end up going to church a few times a year, Easter and Thanksgiving. And so, yeah, I think it's not fair to either person. Or if you are what we call, flirt and convert, where you think if you date someone, they will therefore become a Christian. Like there's a bit of ego conversation in that, but does it happen? Yeah. But I can tell you hundreds of other stories where people just were, on fire for Christ, use whatever terminology we want, and then they're just kind of gone. Now, some Christianese commentary lines we just need to stop saying. God will open the door or close it if it's meant to be. And that's a weird thing. Does God open doors and close doors? I like the bottom one. It says we often walk into bad situations and then blame God that he didn't close the door. Free will is a big thing. You can choose to date and marry the wrong person, and there's destruction that comes along with that. I'm just waiting on God, and waiting on God doesn't mean you push the pause button. It also means this idea that I can't, like for me, I can't love my wife and God at the same time. Sure, I can. I mean, I think sometimes we think like it's one or the other. And I heard someone once say, I just need to focus more on dating Jesus. And I'm like, that's just creepy on every single level. And I just disagree with that whole kind of thought process. So, next question. What are red flags in my relationships? If you don't know what red flags are, if you've ever been on a beach somewhere, there's the different flags. I've been on a beach in years. It was like red. I think red is like the biggest waves, and then orange, kind of yellow, like a light, is like, be careful. Green is go. And then there's another one. It's like teal or purple, which means like there is like, was it stingrays or what are the jellyfish or something else? But this is, just think of it with driving. If you're a 15-year-old watching, if you go through a red light, you might get T-boned. Like, right? Same in our relationships. So dating signs, dating warning signs. Number one is violence towards you of any kind. Now, we are having a growing reckoning. The hashtag #MeToo movement, hashtag #ChurchToo movement. Most of this is revolving around sexuality and sexual abuse and things, but violence is humongous in our church world. Talk to any pastor and we will hear numerous cases of this. And so if someone is violent at all, please be done. And I just think emotional, physical, spiritual, sexual abuse, you're asking for trouble. They might say they're going to change. You need to be away from them and they can change, and you need to see this over long periods of time. I heard once a girl said to me, her husband had dropped a plate of, she dropped a plate of spaghetti and her husband hit her. And she was saying, well, it's just the way he grew up. And it's like, you don't deserve that. Like, it's interesting when you think it's our fault. Number two, explosive or unexplained anger while dating. Dishonesty in all things large and small. I'll say too, more the unexplained anger. I was on a date with a girl. We were at McDonald's. I don't know why. And you know your McDonald's fries are kind of pushed down into the bottom. She tore into this like I don't know, I say 13. I guess at that point we were 20, probably 16-year-old. Just tore into this young girl for the French fries. And it's like, we're done. Like, I will never date you again. Like, why on earth? Like, and then sarcasm and teasing. Now, I am incredibly sarcastic if you know me, and I tease. But you can also, I think people know if you're being, how do I say this? You can be too sarcastic and tease too much, that it's at someone else's expense all the time. And so we just have to be careful with that. Music, and I did a talk on media the other week, but not all music is good and not all music is bad, but music is powerful. And I believe that music plays a role in our lives and we should be careful. Now, this is just a list of musicians over the years. And I would just say none of these are true. The heart wants what the heart wants. No. Got me hoping you'll save me right now. People shouldn't save us. Demi Lovato, got your mind on my body, and like sexual. Tove Lo, sexual. Lady Gaga, do what you want with my body. I heard this song in Swiss Chalet years ago, just at a restaurant having lunch. Rihanna says, feel me up. And it was just a few days ago I watched the Grammys with Megan Thee Stallion, and I don't even want to put, I Googled again her album and I was going to put something in here. I'm just putting a line because I don't even want to begin to go into the sexualization. Here's just what I say. If you're listening to music like this, you're probably not ready to date. And if they're listening to music like this, they're probably not the right person to date. I don't get how suddenly, as a faith-based person, this has become normal. You know what's weird? People get angry at me when I challenge this one slide of people's music. And it's like, around the world, people will die for their faith, and you can't give up a song? There is something about this non-practicing Christian where we want to date someone who loves Jesus. We want to live like this is kind of this lordship issue that we have with music. Another conversation, kind of for another day. Sexting is kind of a red flag. Someone who sends or asks. And I would just challenge people that this is... So here's what people say. I've had people say, well, Brett, you're just old. And I'm like, yeah, I'm 49. And I'm not young. But I would say this. If you think that this is a good way to express love back and forth, what I hear on the other end is the destruction from this. The stories of the young women, and it's almost all young women who were asked to send, and the guys then sent those photos to everyone they know. And whether it's Ottawa, Peterborough, Barrie, Saskatoon, I can tell you city after city across Canada, Chicago in the US was a few months ago, Boston, where people write me and say, what do I do? Everyone in my school has a photo of, my topless photo. And it's like, there's nothing I can do to bring that back. And so there's a prophetic mode. It's a broken expression. The preventative mode, trying to say like this could actually affect you. Pornography. I love how Philip says here down in the middle, they don't know the language of face-to-face contact. Constant arousal, change, novelty, and excitement makes them out of sync with real, slow-developing relationships. Relationships which build slowly. I'm not going to address porn much. I actually talked about this a few weeks ago in a talk called The Porn Project, where we actually walk through this. But I do agree, and men and women both struggle, but this line's kind of written for men. So, leaving the red flags. And red flags, some of them are game changers. If someone hits you, if someone swears at you, if someone can't trust you to be alone, with your friends and are texting you all night, they're deal breakers. There's other things that you can kind of, they don't have to be, but we can walk through them. So how do you know if they're the one? Well, the truth is you don't just ask them. You need to ask lots of questions, which we're going to do, and then you need to see if they live out those answers, because it's easy to say something. It's really hard to actually do it. I also think you need to actually learn each other's love languages. Now, we should do this in marriages and dating relationships and for our friends. And when I speak to parents, there's a new one for parents and one for teenagers and children. But all it says is that there's ways that we receive love and ways that we give love. And just because you love certain things doesn't mean the person you're dating will, meaning it's really interesting to read through this. So I'm going to go through very quickly questions. And so these ones are on money. And now I have a whole list of these. If you go to my brettallman.com, I'm going to give it to you at the end. I have these actually written out. I think it's a PDF for you. So what are your future financial goals? How much debt do you have? I would not marry someone who is just rolling in debt. I just wouldn't do that. You might be okay with that, but then you can't complain. Saver versus spender. Do you pay off credit cards at the end of every month? Again, I would not date someone who leaves balances on. Again, these are choices. Do you tithe? Are you a tax collector or an investor to your church? Great. How much? I think we should give to the church. I think 10% is a good base figure. I don't think that that's it. I think we can even go higher. But again, this goes back to the dating a non-faith, like a Christian versus someone who's not. You want to give money to the church. They don't. Do you give any offerings? Great. Where? You're going to have one account or single? You should have, to me, one. What are your parents' spending habits? Who is paying for your dates? Lifestyle expectations. Kids are expensive is just a statement, but the truth is, yes, they are. And what are your financial goals? All I'm saying here is thinking about money. When you get into a relationship, what kind of money questions is this brought up for you? Money is one of the biggest things that couples get divorced over and have fights over. Money and sex. And so think through these things proactively. Number 2, religious background. Are you a Christian? Great. What does that mean to you? For me, it means going to church, and it's been nice. The church I attend's been open for the last few weeks, as we've been able to go. But what does it mean to you? Does it mean you go on Easter and Christmas? What's your religious background? Will you go to church together as a couple? Great. Which one? What place does faith play in your day-to-day life? And then I would say, what you say, is it actually the same? Are you a practicing Christian or a non-practicing Christian? Are you married to your denomination? Will you raise your kids in the Christian faith? Great. How? What are things that are important to you within your practice faith, and why? And other questions. Like what other questions is this quick conversation of religious background brought up? Do you get my point? These aren't first date questions as well. Some of these are a month in, multi-months in. Dating history. When did you begin dating? What does dating even look like to you? How many people have you seriously dated? How are your breakups? What's your relationship with your past girlfriends and boyfriends currently? How about children? Do you want kids? Someone once yelled out, yes. It's kind of like, that's a weird thing to say. Like, great, you want kids. How many? Do you want a large family or small family? I always wanted 3 kids. My wife wanted 2. My daughter Zoe didn't sleep through the night till she was 2.5 years, and 2 kids is okay. But if they want 5 and you don't want any, do you know how many couples I know who, like, 2 strong Christian couple get married, and 5 years in, one says to the other, so I really want to have kids, and the person's like, I never wanted to have kids, you knew that. And then they split up, and it's like, did you not talk about this? Did you think they would change? What if you're unable? And I don't know why, but I have a lot of people that I know and love in this world who aren't able to have kids. And I don't know, is it pollution, water, food? I don't know. But I know there's a lot of pain. And so infertility, if you can't, do you want to adopt? Another couple I know, strong Christian couple, gets married, both want kids. They can't have kids. And he is willing to adopt, and she said blood only, and then they split up. What if you have a child that's disabled and has any special needs? What kind of home do you want your kids growing up in? How much should the guy be involved? And I say this, we do need a bit of a reckoning in the negative patriarchy conversations. In a lot of my talks, I've talked about this book. This is a deck of cards called Fair Play, just about how guys need to be more involved. During the pandemic, women are now doing what they were doing and a lot more. Men, not as much. Another conversation challenging guys. Are you prepared to devote your lives to raising strong children? Wow, there's so many questions. What do you think of rep sports, competitive dance, gymnastics? My son played rep baseball up until a few years ago. I'm not against this, but it's costly and it takes a lot of time. What might your parenting style be? And you can talk about that if you go. I have a YouTube video on that. How will you discipline kids? And this just should be about teaching, not punishment. And what kinds of things or experiences do you want your children to have? These are big questions to talk to someone about when you're dating, but the answers to these have ramifications for you later in life. Professional goals. What do you want to do for work when you're older? This one matters. I talked to someone who was living in England, and they married an international banker, and she wanted to live back here in the Toronto area. And I'm like, you married an international banker. What did you think you were going to do for the rest of your life? Like, honest, like, who you date, you will marry. What are you doing to reach those goals? Where will you live for this job? I was on a date once, first date. I drive up the driveway, went up, met her family, came down, opened the door for her, and as we're getting out, I forget what happened, but she just said, like, I just can't wait to get married and move to BC. I closed her door, walked around to my door, and I sat down. I said, I still want to go for dinner and a movie, but this will never work because I'm never moving to BC. And we both kind of laughed. Like, it's just because I'm not. I grew up in Ajax. I grew up 4 kilometers from where I am right now. And then I moved once in Ajax. Then I moved to Pickering, literally beside Ajax, the town. 15-minute drive from here. And then when my wife and I wanted to be in one house, we moved to here. And I live in Ajax again. I love that. I love when I am grocery shopping and I see people from high school or different things. I love that. You don't have to. But the person you marry, like if I am living in BC but want to be here and the other person then wants to be there, it doesn't work. What might work-life balance mean to you? And this is a big one as well. Personal health. Right? Dating grows. It's so much more than dinner and a movie, and I so would love to go out for dinner and a movie. Hopefully that comes back soon. How do you feel about each other's physical health? How is your physical health? How do you feel about drinking? How do you feel about smoking? For someone my age, smoking is cigarettes. For someone younger, smoking is weed. These are important conversations. Do you eat a healthy diet? Do you exercise? Smoking is always an interesting one for me because if I dated someone who smoked cigarettes, like I would die. Like, and I have asthma. Like, I literally would die. These are questions. Someone I knew married a guy. He was a smoker, and then she was complaining that everything smelled like smoke. And it's like, what did you think? Like, you married a smoker. Like, what did you... Isn't it funny we don't think ahead? Who you date, you will marry. What that person's doing will continue in the relationship. Personal growths. What are your strengths? How are you working on them? What are your weaknesses? How are you managing them? I want us to be strengths-based people, by the way. Work more on your strengths and manage your weaknesses. What is the current book you're reading? What was the last conference you went to, which will come back soon? What's on your bucket list? Again, dating grows. A few more. Sex. Do you sincerely want to honor God in this area? Great. How will you do this? How will you succeed? If we're going to practice, let's just call it celibacy before marriage, how will you do that? It's incredibly difficult. Will you get tested for STIs, for my generation, STDs? And the number of Christians who tell me they have STDs because this is the kind of world we're living in. Accountability partners, past experiences. And my point with all the questions is this. There's a lot of them. And I encourage you to go find that part of my on my website and download the questions and walk through them. How do you break up? So what if they want to break up with you? Well, it's really easy. If the other person decides that it's not leading where they hope, make it as easy as possible for them to him or her, to humbly bow out and begin looking in other places. And what if you want to break up? Humbly bow out and begin looking in other places. I think this is as simple as it is. I don't know why we go from love to hate quite quickly. So here's some breakup rules. Number 1, it's in person. No text, no voicemail, no tweet or snap. Like, honestly, like, if we're mature enough to date, we're mature enough to do this in person. Be honest while you're breaking up, but don't break them. Does that make sense? Like, be honest while you're breaking up, but the goal is not to break them forever. Like, here's my list of 40 reasons why I hate you. Like, it's okay to say we have differing things or something else. No drama, but emotion's okay. And don't trash talk your ex, ever. I always remember I was in church one day a number of years after I'd broken up with a girl. Actually, it was many, many years. And a buddy of mine at church came up and he said, "Hey, did you hear about..." And he gave me this girl's name. And he kind of smirked. And he said, "Yes, she got divorced." I have one of those big hoodies on, like Billabong hoodies, and my hands are kind of in the big front pocket and my fists both clenched. And I remember praying, "Oh God, help me not hit him." Like, why on earth you would think that I would ever think that's a good thing? Like, other than my wife, my daughter, my mom, my sister, the only other women I've ever loved in my life are my ex-girlfriends. Do I hang out with them? No. Are we friends on social media? I have a lot of people on social media. I don't think I have, but like, I don't think so. Do I wish you the best? Yes, I wish you strong relationships and a good faith and good health and good families. Do I wish you evil? Never. How evil is that we actually go from quote unquote saying we love someone to within seconds afterwards just being horrible. And there's never a good time. Oh, I'll just wait till after Christmas. No, there's never a good time. So what do you do after a breakup? I'd say this, you learn how important community is. Don't run away from the pain. And these videos are ones that I posted online. Allow yourself to grieve and put one day in front of another. I like that. So what if they are the right person for me? Well, first, get engaged and then get married. Get engaged. And I would say this, get counseling. Not an, yes, adding, I'm an and, not an or. I'm not saying don't do if you come from the church world, the premarital stuff that we get from pastors. But sometimes this isn't good. It's 2 or 3 sessions, money, sex, and something else. But you could go to a marriage counselor and get good counseling before you walk into marriage. I encourage you to have short engagements. Someone said to me a few years ago their engagement date, and it was like 3 years they're going to get married afterwards. And my wedding planning advice, yeah, some of you are going, "You're going to give me what?" Yes, here's my wedding planning advice. Well, the moment you get engaged, everyone's going to tell you what you should and shouldn't do for your wedding. Here's what you do for your wedding. Whatever the two of you want. My wife and I got married early in the morning. We had a buffet lunch outdoor in a tent wedding. Our tent was actually at a place called, it was Gardens in Oshawa, which is actually, if you ever watch any X-Men films or Billy Madison, it was literally the same place where the X-Men, plane takes off. But we had no dance, we had no alcohol, we had a buffet lunch, and we played the music that we loved. My wife came down the aisle to Spirit of the West, a band out of Vancouver, Farmer's Daughter, I think it was. It was our wedding, and we chose everything. And I just say to you, make your wedding yours. And after you get married, get counseling. It's okay, keep growing. There's churches often that do, like marriage enrichment and things, and continue to grow as a couple. Terminology, right? Dating, engagement, and marriage. And I would just encourage you, this is a flow chart. Like the goal is to, if you're 15 and you're married at 25 or 30, you still have 40, 50, 60, 70 of years and years being married. So where do you go from here? And I would say, don't do the over things we talked about. I would encourage you to read books, do videos, like even that you're listening to this is great. Prepare your faith, deal with debts, jobs, engage, right? Be around other singles, discuss this conversation, and utilize the community. Ask parents, aunts and uncles, youth pastor, leader, small group person, what do you think about this person? My website is just my name. It's brettallman.com. I think I can put it up. If I can find it. Oh, I can't. Here, I'll put it up here. My website is just my name. And I'm clicking the wrong one. This is the problem when you're doing all the things for yourself. There, brettallman.com. If you click on my website, you will find everything that I've done for the past 5 or 6 years on one place, where it says blog across the top. I think it's 1,000 blogs. And I post on every topic. One of them is dating. This 90 questions to ask when you're dating is part of that kind of flow chart. I think you can click back and forth, but you can find it in there. All my social media is at the top, and I would just say, I always say the best way to use social media is to follow authors, speakers, leaders, pastors, thought leaders, like people who speak on things, so that when you finish this and then look on something else, you get really great content. My YouTube channel, I have, and this is what you're on right now, I have around 200 videos on this, so there's lots of great content. I do have 4 books, 2 on media, 2 on mental health, and the mental health one was written before my breakdown, and the reset was actually my breakdown. And my newest book is actually this. It's a beast of a book. It's actually a 226,000 word handbook on all kinds of topics. And this is why I say this is the first 6 chapters are on parenting, but the last 10 chapters are on everything, and they're written for a parent or a student. I've written them in the same way, so like whether it's mental health or dating or pornography, anyone can read those conversations. And you get my books on Amazon as well. And every talk that I've done here, I've been doing live, so you can get the newest versions that are online. A couple things that we're done. I got accepted I think it's about 3 weeks ago now, to the Amazon Influencers Program. Now, I don't like that term, but it means that every book that I suggest in every topic I speak on and some others, I can post here. And so if you go to this amazon.ca shop Brett Ullman, if you go into, because this is on YouTube, if you go into the comments in the description, I actually link this directly for you. But click on dating and you'll find all the books that I suggest. You don't have to buy them, but you can go to YouTube and you can see them. And a couple of books that I did really like. True Love Dates was pretty decent. And then Andy Stanley has the 4-part series of Love, Sex, and Dating, which I just think was a fantastic series. And if you are my age, many of us grew up with the I Kissed Dating Goodbye. And on Amazon Prime Video, I Survived, I Kissed Dating Goodbye is a very interesting documentary. There is so much in these conversations. And as always, I kind of say at the end of my talks, I want you to process this. Go for a walk. The weather seems to be nicer these days. You'll find there's a lot of ideas and thoughts, and then look at how you can implement this. If you are a student, if you are dating, look at how you can get better at your dating relationship. If you are engaged or married, these conversations still apply to us. How do we get better in them? If If you have any questions, you can find me online. If you could ever use me for a talk for your church, camp, conference, or any other environment, I would love to come in virtually or digitally, or today we're doing a lot of mix of both of those in different places. Thank you so much for joining. Hope you have a good day. I'll talk to you soon.